Okay, here we go again. We have yet another Mitsubishi Super VHS VCR. Mitsubishi made. This is another one with the Electrohome branding. This is an ARGH j04. You may have seen my video on repairing my ARGH j05 and my HSU 65. This is the equivalent of, I believe it was an HSU 63. It's the prior year to the 65 that had the whole fold down front. It's the same year of as the J05, and how we can tell on the Electrohome brand is the J was the model year. But this is the J04 HSU, it's either 62 or 63 under the Mitsubishi branding. And it has a problem. The playback picture sucks when playing a Super VHS tape. I haven't tried a standard VHS tape in it yet. But I'm guessing that it's probably going to be okay.
They fold down 45 degrees.
Which it is. So the problem is just like the other two. It's a problem with playing back a Super VHS recording. You can see there's a lot of dropouts showing up on this tape too. But I mean, it's not as bad as the others, but it doesn't look right. I mean, it just the picture, there's ringing in the picture here, and there's there's some severe smear. It just doesn't look good as a Super VHS recording should look. So we're going to pull this one apart and take a look at what's going on inside this machine here. I believe it's probably very, very similar in design to the other ones. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if it doesn't contain the same module. So we got the top cover off the machine. Again, same transport, exactly. Little different power supply layout. It's still linear power supply on here, which is very good. Very reliable. And I don't think there's ever been any capacitors that have blown up on this particular unit like the other Mitsubishi did. My other one, the capacitors literally exploded, but the HSU 65, the bottoms actually blew out on them, and they sprayed electrolytic all over the board. And that's because Mitsubishi had put ones in that were rated too close to the operating voltage. It's amazing how these manufacturers do this all too frequently too. Then they have to change the design. Unfortunately, I got an early one. There's our signal board. I've already taken the screws out of this thing, that's why I'm able to do this. You can flip the board up. And here's it looks like our video board here. Our tuners on here. And I don't see one of those little daughter boards in here, at least not yet. I wonder what's under, if I look underneath this board. Oh, wait a minute, I spoke too soon. This is actually the hi-fi board, this one. This is the hi-fi audio and the tuner's on here. I think the tuner's on there. Yeah, that's the tuner. Tuner's on here, but this is the hi-fi audio. Or at least this section of the circuit is. This section of the circuit is the tuner, and this section of the circuit is the hi-fi audio. Maybe my... I just lost my signal from my tuner when I took this apart. Oh, it's just my cable came apart. Here's an example why you want to use compression fittings. Non-compression fittings have a tendency to come apart. Don't use crimp-ons. Crimp-on fittings, they don't work. Only use compression fittings. Just as in the last two machines I repaired, it's got this bloody module made by JVC. I guess this is maybe the demod or subluminance module or something in the video process, but it only affects the Super VHS. And that's probably why it was made, the parts made by JVC. I think if we did a bit of digging, we would probably find that JVC, since they developed the Super VHS format, didn't license anybody else to make the circuitry that gave the picture enhancements. JVC wanted to maintain the quality, so they made the sub-assembly and sold it as a complete assembly to anybody that wanted to incorporate Super VHS. And they probably had to buy all the parts from JVC, so JVC got the royalties for the development of it. That's probably why these all have the same or similar parts in them. Anyway, speculation. I'm just waiting for the soldering iron to warm up. We're going to replace that electrolytic capacitor right here that's on this sub-assembly, because without even going any further, I mean, sure, I could put my scope on. Do you want to see it? Maybe we'll put the scope on it while I'm waiting for it to warm up, just so we can see what it looks like. I know what it's going to be because this is the third one. This is the third one today. The other two machines that I fixed, I already did them today. And I was just in the process of putting stuff away back in my storage unit. And lo and behold, I had this one in there too. And I almost forgot that I had this one, because this is one of the earlier ones. And I think this one broke down, and I replaced it with the 65. So let's just put the scope on it and see what the signal looks like. There's our signal on one side of the capacitor. There's the other side of the capacitor there. Just look at the difference in level. Holy smoke. There's one side. There's the other side. So say this particular unit doesn't have as bad a picture as the other ones, but it's bad nevertheless. Nice noisy tape supply spools these things have. Okay, my iron's probably hot enough now. We'll just take that board out and swap out that part, make this one work too. It's IC2A5 if anyone's interested, and we'll just get the solder wick out here and just remove this thing. Now, like the other machine, this one here has got surface mounted parts that are in relatively close proximity. So you got to be careful with the solder wick that the tail of it, which is hot enough to melt components, doesn't make contact with any of the other surface mounted parts in the vicinity, or you'll be inadvertently lifting other parts out and creating another problem. So that's the one word of advice, is just be careful when you're using this stuff that you don't accidentally lift other parts out of the way. When I was in the service business, I never had that problem myself, but I did have a couple of junior technicians that worked under me, and every so often you know, they'd be working on something like this, and then they replaced the part they were working on, and something else went wrong. And then it would come over to my bench because it was beyond their ability. We had the boss man who was just at this point starting to freak out because a customer's machine now has a totally different problem than before. And it would get onto my bench. And I'd stare at it and realize that there was a chip resistor or chip capacitor or a chip transistor that had been lifted. And I'd be like, okay guys, where's your roll of solder wick? What are you talking about? Let me see the braid that you used, and go and get it from them and inspect it. Sure enough, you know, I'd find a little chip stuck to it somewhere, and I'd get the iron out and heat it up and take it off there and get the tweezers out and put it back on the board. That was a regular occurrence where I used to work with a couple of the guys. I was the senior diagnostic engineer at the shop, but I had, at one point, I had 2 or 3 guys working under me that were juniors, and they were the grunts. They did all the really common stuff that was coming in, where we'd see the same thing over and over and over and over, like belt kits on RCA VCRs, or headphone jacks on Walkmans back in the days when you fixed Walkmans, and answering machines and all those other little shitty little consumer electronic devices that the quality was just atrocious. And I got the tough stuff that no one had seen before, and no one knew how to tackle. So I had all the tough dogs. I used to get all the dogs. I got all the sets that were barking. And the other guys, they got all the easy stuff. But yeah, more occasions than not, they'd be sloppy with this stuff and create another problem. Okay, so here's the cap. And let's just see if this one's leaking crap onto the board like the other ones. I bet it is. Get the magnifier down here. Oh yeah, yeah. I'll get this up close to the camera. You can see it. But there you go. You can see the shit that's leaking out of this thing. You know, another one of these JVC modules, and another problem that this is becoming like the Sony soundboard problems. It's like everyone, I now know every time I see one of these machines, which I probably will never see again because I've only got 3 of them, but at least now all 3 of mine will be fixed. So there's the capacitor that was out of the original one, the HSU82, and you can clearly see it's 4.7 microfarads at 35 volts. This one is 22 microfarads at 6.3 volts, which is the same as the other one. It was also 22. It was a 22 at 6 volts, which I find interesting that the HSU82 was 6.3. I had to go back and look at that. I thought maybe, or 4.7. I thought maybe I misread it, but there's definitely a dot there. See that? There's definitely a dot there. That's definitely 4.7 at 35 volts, whereas the other one's a 22 at 6 volts. Anyway, I just found that interesting that, obviously this is the same board as the other, the HSU65 uses. The HSU82 is obviously a different circuit, and it had a different size capacitor on it. So just bringing that important part up, that check the capacity, because they are different on the different boards. Clip the capacitor off here, and remove the pins separately, because I don't want to risk damaging the board any more than it already is. It's already had electrolytic leaking on it, so I don't want to damage the thing any more than it already is. So the procedure to prevent further damage is use your side cutters and just remove the board, remove the capacitor, cut it off, and then you can heat the pins up and just remove the separate pins. Because the big problem with these surface mounted electrolytic capacitors is, and this is a huge problem on the camcorders of the day. What goes wrong with these things is the electrolytic in them, the pH wasn't balanced, and when they were either in a discharged or a charged state, I forget which one, I think it was discharged, the electrolytic became slightly alkaline, and when the electrolytic became alkaline, it actually ate through the rubber plug on the bottom and caused the electrolytic to leak out. And you can see if you look at this board, this is what it does to the board. There, you can see what it does to the board, right? This crud that's on the board here, this is from the leaking electrolytic. You can see it's turning the traces black. It's really bad stuff, and quite often it would actually damage the board, and that's what happened on my Panasonic machine that used the same things. They use the same electrolytic caps. This was a big problem on a lot of electronics, a lot of camcorders. It was a real problem on camcorders. Canon and Sony did 8mm cameras. They were plagued with this problem. I mean, it was such a problem. I remember some of those early, like the CCTV 5000s, which was not a cheap camera. That was a high-end, very expensive consumer camera. You know, it was like $3,000. And here guys are buying these things, and the caps all went bad in them. You know, if that's not bad enough, I had one. I had a V5000, and I had to replace every single capacitor in it. I mean, it just, after a few years, it no longer worked. And it was due to the capacitors that they all started to leak. On a regular 8mm camera, you just throw it out, right? But on a high-end one, like a high 8 or a professional one, you generally try to fix it because they were a fairly pricey piece of equipment. But it was a huge problem. These bloody surface-mounted components. So we've replaced the cap on here. I'm now going to go in and replace the cap onto the board. I got to hurry up here because I got like 4 minutes of memory left. So we're going to stop the camera here while I put the part back in so we can test it. So we'll just solder the module back in. Looks good. Okay. Circuit board's back in place. We'll zoom the camera out so we can get a shot of the monitor here. Play. Look at that. Looks great. Yes. That's another one fixed. So that's 3 Mitsubishi Super VHS machines, all with similar problems: ringing picture, smear, lines in the picture, colored lines in the picture, just a washed out picture that did not look normal, lost its detail. And same problem on all of the machines. So I hope you guys enjoyed this series on how to fix these Mitsubishi machines. I'm sure that a lot of you are going to be running into this problem with these machines. They were a relatively popular machine back in the late 80s, and there's lots of them, I think, still out there. And for anybody who's archiving tapes over to DVD, this is one of the better machines to do it with. And there you go. Again, the model of this one's Electrohome HSU or sorry, AVR-J04, the Mitsubishi model. I believe this was an HSU 63. I think that was the model number. Anyway, we're going to clean the heads on this and then we're done. Okay, to clean the heads, just pop open the head drum assembly, or take off the shield cover. The head drums here. This is a standard 6-head machine. Actually, no, this is an 8-head machine. This has got 2 flying. So we just get our good old Trusky head cleaner out here. Put some on a piece of writing paper. Just hold it up against the drum and spin a few times. And the heads are clean. We'll make a test recording just to see how this thing works.